If you take the final book of the Harry Potter, right, which was published back in 2007, and you add the famous 19 years later from the epilogue, you arrive at the year 2026.
Which is wild to think about.
Right. And for a massive portion of the audience, that math just makes perfect sense. You assume the story you are consuming is happening roughly right, or at least like in the general modern era.
Yeah, you project your own timeline.
Exactly. But if you actually look at the author's hidden foundational timeline, the Battle of Hogwarts ended in 1998, which means that sweeping, nostalgic epilogue where they put their kids on the train, that didn't happen in the distant future of 2026.
No, it did not.
It actually happened 5 years ago, in 2019.
It fundamentally rewrites your entire relationship with the setting when you realize that.
It really does.
I mean, the story isn't a modern fantasy at all. It is strictly a 1990s period.
Welcome to the deep dive. We are taking a massive stack of sources today, articles, character analyses, timeline breakdowns, and, deep lore explorations regarding the wizarding world. And we are extracting the hidden architecture of the story.
And just to be clear, we aren't just summarizing the plot for you today.
No, absolutely not. We are dissecting the psychological profiles of the heroes and villains, uncovering the hidden meanings behind names, looking at deleted backstories, and really revealing how the mechanics of this narrative completely manipulate your emotions as a reader.
Because the things you think you know about this universe are they're often just the surface layer.
Yeah.
It's basically a masterclass in narrative misdirect where the scaffolding is actively hidden from you until the precise moment it needs to, hold the entire emotional weight of the finale.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I want to start right where we open, with that literal timeline of the wizarding. You assume it's the 2000s because, the movies completely dominated the 2000s.
Right, the pop culture impact was all 2000.
Exactly. But the author started writing on a delayed train in 1990. She mapped it out for a year, meaning the narrative of the first book literally begins in 1990.
And that timeline is entirely locked to when the creation began. All the historical dates, the births of the characters, the timeline of the first Wizarding War, the age of the parents.
Which is always so shocking.
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
But it's all anchored to that 1991 starting point. And knowing this context, it completely shifts how you understand the environment these characters are interacting with. And honestly, more importantly, how they solve problems.
Yeah, when I was going through the research, this clicked so many things into place for me regarding the technology, or I guess the total lack of it.
The analog nature of it all.
Yes, if you read the books now, you might wonder why teenagers are using VHS tapes, or why there is zero mention of DVDs or cell phones or the internet.
Right, and people always say, magic interferes with electricity.
Which is the in-universe excuse, sure. But the real reason is just because the author was writing about the world as it existed in the early to mid-90s.
And that analog nature of their world is crucial to the mystery mechanics of the plot. I mean, think about it. If Hermione Granger had access to a 2004-era internet search engine, let alone a modern smartphone, the mystery of Nicholas Flamel in the first book is solved in, 3 seconds?
Literally a Wikipedia. Nicholas Flamel, Alchemy, Sorcerer's Stone. Boom, book over.
Exactly. Instead, she is relying on massive physical library registries. She's cross-referencing heavy tomes and utilizing the sheer physical endurance of analog research. The 1990s setting enforces a deliberate pacing on the flow of information.
Which makes you realize that the theatrical adaptation skewed our perception of the era entirely.
Yeah.
You watch those later movies and the kids are walking around in 2005 era zip-up hoodies. They're sporting those long, shaggy mid-2000s haircuts, listening to music that sounds distinctly modern.
Yeah, the cinematic adaptations bled into the cultural zeitgeist of the 2000s to appeal to the audience sitting in the theater. But the text itself is an artifact of 1990s Britain.
Right. And to truly understand the foundation of this story, we really have to strip away that 2000s cinematic gloss and look at how these elements were literally drafted into existence before a single book was published.
Which brings us to the drafting process. It's fascinating.
The original 40 notebook. Oh my gosh, imagine you are holding the literal DNA of the wizarding world.
It's an incredible literary.
It really is. The author kept this tiny, slightly water-stained notebook, right? Covered in light pencil scribblings. Some of the pages even just have doodles drawn by her infant daughter at the time.
Just everyday life happening around this massive creative undertaking.
Yeah, and inside this notebook is a comprehensive list of the 40 student Harry. She mapped out their Hogwarts houses, their parentage, and their general background before chapter.
The level of premeditation is staggering. She wasn't discovering the classroom as she wrote it. She had already populated it.
Right, they already existed in her head.
Exactly. But what is truly revealing for anyone studying narrative design is looking at the iterative process of naming these characters.
Yeah.
Because names carry immense psychological weight, and the original drafts show this deep search for the right phonetic impact.
The iconic names we know so intimately now were almost completely different, like Hermione Granger, for example. In the Notebook, she was originally penciled in as Hermione Puck.
Puckle. I mean, the psychological difference between Granger and Puckle is vast.
It sounds like a totally different character.
It does. The name Granger implies something steadfast, rooted, serious. Historically, it ties to the Granger movement in the 1800s, which was this agrarian coalition focused on improving the lives of ordinary citizens.
Oh, wow. Which is incredibly fitting for a character who eventually dedicates herself to camp for the rights of marginalized men.
Right. But Puckle, on the other hand, it sounds whimsical, bouncy, and perhaps a bit too common.
Yeah, it's very silly. Hermione Puck.
It totally undercuts the severe intellect and eventual ruthlessness that defines the smartest witch of her age.
The phonetic impact is so real. Look at Neville Longbottom. In the notes, he was almost Neville Puff or Neville Sidebottom.
Sidebottom is rough.
It's so rough. Imagine the absolute terror of the final book, facing down Lord Voldemort in the burning rubble of the castle, drawing the sword of Gryffindor, and you're named Neville Puff.
It just entirely removes the gravity of his eventual arc. Puff implies something light, easily blown away, lacking substance.
Right, like a cream puff.
Exactly. Whereas Longbottom, while slightly humorous, it sounds grounded. It implies a deep, enduring foundation, which is exactly what Neville provides for the resistance in the final.
And then you have the antagonists. Draco Malfoy went through several iterations, too. He was initially listed as Draco Spundin and then Draco Spinks before she finally settled on Malfoy. Spungin. It sounds like a wet sponge. It doesn't have that sharp, aristocratic, venomous bite to it at all.
Not at all. But, the most fascinating entry in that original notebook isn't a name that simply changed. It's a name that fractured.
Oh, yes. The split.
Right. It spawned two entirely different crucial characters over the course of the decade.
Lily Moon. When I saw this in the notes, it blew my mind.
It's such a cool look into the creative process.
In the original drafting phase, Lily Moon was conceived as this ethereal, dreamy, slightly faded girl in the background of the classroom.
And the process here is a prime example of an author recognizing the symbolic weight of their own ideas.
Yeah.
Because the author realized she needed the name Lily for the protagonist's tragically deceased mother.
Right, because of the flower connotation.
Exactly. The name carries heavy cultural connotations of purity, innocence, and, in Victorian flower language, a connection to immortality and resurrection. So she takes the name Lily and assigns it to the mother to anchor that maternal sacrifice. But she still loved the psychological concept of that dreamy, odd, detached girl named Moon.
So she basically puts that personality trait in a drawer for 5. She shelves the concept of the dreamy girl until the 5th book, when the narrative actually requires someone who can see things others can't.
And then she introduces Luna Lovegood.
Luna, obviously retaining the direct connection back to the moon. And she inherits all those dreamy, detached, slightly unsettling qualities originally meant for that background.
It demonstrates just how deliberate the naming conventions are in this universe. The names aren't just aesthetic labels. They are destinies encoded into the characters from birth.
It's like knowing the secret to a magic trick before you see it performed on stage. Once you learn the etymology behind these characters, you realize the author was telling you exactly what was going to happen to them from the very...
Oh, the coding is almost aggressively straightforward in some...
Give me an example.
Take Remus Lupin. Remus refers directly to the Roman mythological figure, one of the twin brothers raised by a she-wolf.
Right, Romulus and Remus.
Exactly. And Lupin is derived from the Latin word lupus, which literally translates to wolf. His entire tragic condition of lycanthropy, his secret shame, is broadcasted to the reader the literal second his name is spoken on the Hogwarts Express.
That is wild. And his best friend, Sirius Black, he's named after the star Sirius, which in astronomy is quite literally known as the dog star.
Massive spoiler.
A huge spoiler when you realize his secret, illegal, magical ability is transforming into a giant black dog. What about the political figures? Because they seem to carry a lot of thematic weight in their names, too.
Oh, Cornelius Fudge is the perfect distillation of this technique. If you look at the word fudge as a verb, it means to present or deal with something in a vague, non-committal, or inadequate way.
Or to fudge the numbers.
Right. It means to evade the truth, or to speak nonsense to cover up a mistake.
Which is the literal blueprint for his entire character arc. He spends the entire 5th book evading the truth about the return of... He feeds the public absolute nonsense through the newspaper because he is fundamentally too cowardly to face the reality of a second war. He fudges the leadership of the entire country.
But if we're looking at names that foreshadow complex moral trajectories, Draco Malfoy is perhaps the most nuanced example in the entire text.
I want to dig into this one because Malfoy seems like such a generic, bad guy name until you really break down the linguistics of it.
Yeah, the first name, Draco, comes from the Latin for dragon. But, more historically, it ties to Draco, the Athenian lawmaker known for his unforgiving rules.
Which gives us the word draconian.
Exactly, meaning unusually harsh or cruel. That establishes the character's immediate behavior, right? He is a harsh, cruel bully. But the surname Malfoy is where the narrative destiny lies.
Okay, lay on me.
In Old French, mal translates to bad or evil, and foi translates to faith. So Malfoy effectively translates to bad faith.
Bad faith. So it's not just that they are bad people, they operate in bad faith.
It represents a literal loss of faith, which encapsulates the entire Malfoy family's arc over the 7 books.
Oh, wow.
They act in bad faith for years, supporting a tyrant for their own social elevation. But by the final act of the story, they experience a complete and utter loss of faith in Voldemort and his cause.
The reality of what they wanted breaks them.
The brutality of it, yes.
Yeah.
Their loyalty fractures, and they defect simply to save themselves. The destiny of their ideological collapse is baked right into their surname.
Knowing that the author planted destinies in the literal syllables of the characters' names completely changes how you read the dialogue. I mean, it makes it far less surprising that the story's biggest, most earth-shattering twists were hiding in plain sight from the very...
Oh, absolutely, because if she's hiding destinies and names, she's absolutely hiding endgame reveals in casual conversation.
The foreshadowing in this series operates on a layer of meticulousness that you genuinely cannot perceive on a first read. You just can't.
No, it requires the context of the ending to understand the beginning.
And there is no better example of this than the master manipulator himself, Severus Snape.
The first potions class.
Yes. I want you to think back to the very first book. Harry is in his very first potion. Snape, this terrifying, looming figure, singles Harry out immediately and asks him a seemingly impossible question about brewing.
Right.
He asks, what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of worm? On the surface, if you are just reading the plot, it's a strict teacher bullying a celebrity student with advanced trivia.
And the text wants you to feel Harry's embarrassment.
Right.
It wants you to dislike Snape.
Right. But if you decode the specific ingredients Snape chooses, using Victorian flower language communication, we know the author utilized extensively the true meaning of that scent devastating.
It really is.
Asphodel is a specific type of lily, and in this historical floral code, it carries the specific "my regrets follow."
And then worm.
And wormwood is universally used in these codes to symbolize absence, bitterness, and profound.
So if you translate the literal ingredients of the potion, Snape's very first aggressively delivered words to this orphaned boy actually translate to, I bitterly regret Lily's death.
It gives me chills. He is confessing his ultimate motivation, his enduring grief, and his secret loyalty, masked entirely beneath a veil of academic hostility in his very first breath of dialogue.
The revelation of his love for Lily doesn't actually happen until thousands of pages later. It's in the memories provided in the final book. But the structural architecture for that reveal was poured in Chapter 8 of Book 1.
It's stunning, the sheer audacity to put the final puzzle piece on the table in the first hour of the story.
And it's not the only time a major endgame plot point is telegraphed years in advance.
No. What about the end of the 4th book? The moment with Dumbledore's gleam of triumph.
Oh, yes. This is a moment that perfectly illustrates the difference between what the protagonist perceives and what the mentor understands. So, at the end of the 4th book, Harry has just survived a harrowing encounter in a grave. Lord Voldemort has finally resurrected himself into a physical body. Harry is sitting in Dumbledore's office, traumatized, explaining the dark ritual.
Right, he's recounting the whole horrifying thing.
Exactly. And he specifically notes that Voldemort tied Harry up and forcibly took Harry's blood to recreate his own body.
Which, to anyone listening, seems like a mass. Up until that point, the one tactical advantage Harry had was the ancient magical protection his mother left blood. Voldemort literally couldn't touch his skin without experiencing agonizing pain.
Yes, the protection from Book 1.
Right. So taking the blood circumvented that defense entirely.
It seems disastrous to Harry. But as Harry is recounting this detail about the blood, the narration notes that for a fleeting fraction of a second, Harry sees a gleam of something like triumph in Dumbledore's eye.
If you're reading that for the first time, it's incredibly jarring. Why on earth is Dumbledore triumphant that the wizarding equivalent of a fascist dictator has just bypassed their absolute best defense?
The psychological mechanism behind that reaction is rooted in Dumbledore's overarching burden. Because, Dumbledore is playing three-dimensional chess while everyone else is playing checkers.
That's the perfect way.
For years, Dumbledore has known a horrific truth. Harry contains a piece of Voldemort's soul, a Horcrux. To defeat Voldemort permanently, that piece of soul must be destroyed, which means Harry eventually must die.
Such a dark burden.
Right. Dumbledore has been carrying the knowledge that he is raising this boy to be a sacrifice.
But then Voldemort takes the blood.
Yes. By taking Harry's blood into his own living body, Voldemort makes a fatal, arrogant heir. He unwittingly tethers Lily's protective charm to his own life. He essentially anchors Harry to the living world. The moment Dumbledore hears that, he realizes that as long as Voldemort remains alive with that stolen blood in his vein, Harry cannot be permanent.
He became a Horcrux for Harry.
Exactly. Voldemort has inadvertently become the very thing guaranteeing Harry's survival when the time comes to destroy the soul fragment.
Dumbledore saw the path to victory in that graveyard. He knew he had won the war 3 books before the war ended.
Yes, that fleeting gleam in his eye isn't just tactical satisfaction. It is the momentary release of a decade of sickening anxiety. He realizes the boy doesn't have to stay dead.
And this raises a fascinating point about narrative design. A perfect plot twist requires 2 seemingly contradictory elements, doesn't it?
It does. It must be entirely shocking in the violent moment of revelation, but upon subsequent reflection, it must feel entirely inevitable.
Every clue must have been present, simply ignored or misinterpreted by the reader's inherent biases.
And I think the gold standard for that, at least in this universe, and maybe in modern fantasy, has to be the revelation of Scabbers the Rat in the 3rd book.
Oh, without a doubt. For 3 entire books, Ron Weasley has this useless, slightly gross, mundane pet rat named Scabbers.
Sleeping in his pocket.
Yeah, just background noise. A joke, really. And then, in this terrifying claustrophobic sequence in the Shrieking Shack, we find out this rat is actually an illegal animagus.
A grown man.
He is a grown man named Peter Pettigrew, the man who betrayed Harry's parents.
The reason that twist is so masterful isn't just the surprise. It's the psychological violation it represents.
Violation is the exact right word.
It violates the sanctity of the character's safe space. This isn't a monster lurking in the dark depths of the Forbidden Forest or, a dragon guarding a vault. This is a grown, treacherous man who has been sleeping in a young boy's bed for 3 years.
Makes my skin crawl.
He has been eating crumbs off their sheets, listening to their private conversation. It completely shatters the illusion of safety that the Gryffindor dormitory is supposed to provide.
When you really think about the logistics of it, it's horrifying. And the clues were all there. The rat lived for 12 years, which is unusually long for a garden rat.
Way too long.
Way too long. He was missing a toe, which perfectly matched the singular finger found at the scene of Pettigrew's supposed explosive murder. We had all the puzzle.
But our brains refuse to assemble them because the idea of a middle-aged man hiding as a child's pet is too transgressive to naturally assume.
We just don't want to go there.
Exactly. It preys on our assumption that the mundane is harmless. But to fully understand how mechanics govern the stakes of this universe, we really have to look at how the author handles concepts that traditionally break narrative.
Which brings me to a major point of contention I have, and I know a lot of fans have. I have to push back on the introduction of the Time Turner in that very same book.
Ah, the Time Turner debate.
Yes. Hermione is given a necklace that lets her travel back in time just so she can take extra class. And then they use it to save Sirius Black and a hippogriff from X.
Right.
To a lot of readers, that is a massive gaping plot hole. If you have a device that can reverse time, why not just use the Time Turner to go back 50 years and kill baby Voldemort? Why is there a war at all?
It is arguably the most common critique leveled at the 3rd book. Time travel is notoriously difficult to implement without lowering the stakes of the entire universe to 0.
It usually breaks a story completely.
But the author actually established severe, unyielding physical limits on true time travel in this universe, specifically to prevent that kind of narrative collapse. The magic is inherently self-limiting.
Okay, explain the mechanism for us, because a casual reader just sees a magic clock that undoes death. How does it actually work?
The fundamental unbreakable rule of the Time Turner is the physical toll of relativity. The user ages rapidly relative to the time they travel backwards.
Oh, aging. Okay.
Yes. If Hermione goes back 3 hours to attend a charms class, her body ages an extra 3 hours. The physical toll is negligible. You'd barely notice it.
Sure, 3 hours is nothing.
But the magic exacts a literal biological cost for larger jumps. If someone attempted to use a Time Turner to go back, let's say 10 years into the past to change a major historical event, and then attempted to return to their present timeline,
what happens?
Their physical body would have aged 10 years upon their return.
Oh. So it's not just a free pass. The time debt is paid by your own self.
Like,
so if a wizard tried to be the ultimate hero and go back 60 or 70 years to stop a young Tom Riddle at the orphanage,
they would likely age into dust upon returning to their present, assuming the temporal shock of the journey itself didn't kill them outright, of course.
Wow.
The mechanics ensure that the narrative stakes remain intact, because time travel is not a cure-all. It is a highly restricted, incredibly dangerous tool only suitable for minor, localized adjustment. The universe protects its own timeline by threatening the biology of the traveler.
Which, if I may just vent for a second, makes later theatrical adaptations, specifically certain stage plays that claim to be official canon, incredibly frustrating for longtime readers.
I know exactly what you're referring.
You watch these newer adaptations completely ignore these established rules, having characters jump back decades multiple times to change history without suddenly aging 80 or 90 years. It feels wildly inconsistent with the meticulous blueprint we just talked about.
It is inconsistent. When adaptations discard the internal logic established by the source material, the architectural integrity collapses.
Exactly.
If time travel has no biological cost, then every death is preventable. And therefore, no death has emotional weight. The stakes simply evaporate.
The stakes matter because the flaws of the characters matter. The Time Turner proves that even the most powerful magic can't rewrite the past without destroying the user.
Right.
And yet, readers constantly try to rewrite the past of the story's villains, hoping for a magical redemption that the text simply doesn't support.
We project what we want to see.
We do. If the plot is built on misdirection, so are our perceptions of the characters. We really need to strip away the movie glamour, the Hollywood shine, and look at the brutal, unvarnished facts people actually are on.
Which brings us to a psychological phenomenon within the fandom that the author herself has found quite perplexing over the years.
Oh, I know where this is going.
The persistent, intense romanticization of Draco Malfoy.
It is everywhere. If you spend 5 minutes looking at fan communities online, you will see fans pairing Draco romantically with almost every major character in the...
It's massive.
They violently defend his actions, claiming he was just a misunderstood victim of his upbringing, a tragic boy forced into a terrible situation by his abusive father with no way out.
And this interpretation directly contradicts the source text.
Totally contradicts it.
The author has addressed this explicitly in interviews and essays, stating how unnerved she is by the sheer number of young women falling for what she calls Draco's dark glamour.
Dark glamour, yes.
She's been very firm in stating that Draco is not concealing a heart of gold under all his sneering and prejudice. He is exactly who he appears to be.
We have to call it what it is. It's the Tom Felton effect.
Undoubtedly.
Casting a charismatic, conventionally attractive actor to portray a deeply flawed, bigoted character naturally skews the audience's moral judgment.
The visual appeal of the actor creates a halo effect. The audience assumes positive internal traits based entirely on positive external appearance.
It's like looking at AI-generated images based strictly on the literal book descriptions versus looking at the Hollywood casting.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
In the books, these characters are often deeply plain or specifically physically flawed. Hermione is repeatedly described with large front teeth and bushy hair. She's not meant to look like an international fashion icon in her 4th year.
No, she's an awkward teenager.
Right. Petunia Dursley is explicitly described as having a long horse face. And Draco Malfoy in the text was a pale, pointed, sneering bigot. He was not the brooding, emotionally complex heartthrob we saw on screen.
He really wasn't.
The movie glamour literally softened the edges of his cruelty for millions, changing how an entire generation judged his morality.
Because if we rely strictly on the text, Draco's actions are not those of a helpless, reluctant victim.
Yeah.
While it's true his family exerted ideological pressure, he reveled in their blood supremacy.
He bragged about it constantly.
He didn't just passively accept it, he actively weaponized it. He viciously bullied Muggle-born students for years. When the Chamber of Secrets was opened and a monster was petrifying children, he stood in the hallway and publicly wished for the death of his Muggle-born class. He eagerly sought the prestige of joining the death.
He only hesitates when he realizes he might actually kill.
Exactly. His hesitation to the 6th book isn't born of a sudden moral awakening or a realization that fascism is wrong. It's born of self-preservation and utter terror when he realizes he's entirely out of his depth.
The task Voldemort gave him is a punishment, and he knows it.
He was never written to have a grand redemption arc where he sees the error of his way.
I have to argue the other side here, because if we are stripping away the romanticized gloss of the villain, we have to tackle the biggest, most toxic debate in the entire fandom.
The James versus Snape debate.
The moral reckoning. Was James Potter actually worse than Severus Snape? Because half the fan base sees Snape's double agent status as the ultimate redemption. He sacrificed his life, whereas they look at James Potter and just see a privileged, arrogant...
It is a highly contentious topic. But if we analyze the textual evidence impartially, the argument that James is the greater evil requires an enormous amount of cherry picking.
Okay, let's break it down.
The trajectory of their entire lives is what defines their morality, not just their behavior at age 15.
But the behavior at 15 is brutal. We do see James Potter being an absolute menace in his school days.
We do.
Through Snape's memories, we watch James hang Snape upside down, humiliate him in front of the entire school, threaten to expose his underwear. I mean, it's targeted, relentless bullying.
It is bullying,
Yeah.
and the text does not excuse it. James was an arrogant, privileged teenager who used his popularity to torment a socially isolated classmate.
Right.
However, the text also shows us that James eventually recognized his own toxicity and matured. Dumbledore saw this growth, which is why James was appointed head boy.
He grew out of it.
More importantly, as an adult, James dedicates his life to the Order of the Phoenix. He uses his privilege and wealth to actively fight against a rising fascist regime, and ultimately he dies a heroic death.
Without even having his wand.
Exactly. He stands unarmed in his hallway, trying to hold off the most dangerous dark wizard in history with his bare hands, simply to buy his wife and child a few seconds to escape.
Right. He dies for a cause greater. And then we look at Snape's trajectory.
Snape's path is fundamentally darker. While he was undeniably a victim of bullying, he was not an innocent bystander. He was deeply entrenched in the dark arts from a very young age.
People forget that part.
He actively chose to associate with a group of Slytherin students who would almost all become high-ranking Death Eaters. He was inventing dark magic spells that physically sliced people open.
Sectum sempra. And we cannot ignore the race, or, the magical equivalent.
Snape harbored a deep-seated ideological prejudice against Muggleborn. This culminates in the worst memory, when Lily Evans, his supposed best friend, and the woman he claims to love unconditionally, stands up to defend him against James's bull. Snape's reaction is to lash out at the person saving and call her a mudblood, the most vile slur in their society.
Yeah.
And as Lily correctly points out to him later that night, he calls everyone of her birth that word. He fully buys into the supremacist ideology. Why should she be any different just because he has a crush?
He literally joins a murderous wizard Nazi cult as an adult. He takes the dark mark willingly.
He does. And the inciting incident for the entire tragedy of the series rests squarely on his shoulder.
Because of the prophecy.
Yes, Snape is the one who overhears the prophecy about a child born at the end of July. He actively chooses to deliver that information to Lord Voldemort, knowing full well it marks a pregnant woman or a baby for execution.
He is complicit in political assassination.
He only feels remorse when he realizes Voldemort has interpreted the prophecy to mean Lily's child rather than the Longbottoms.
And this leads to that devastating interaction with Dumbledore on the hilltop.
Yeah.
Snape goes to Dumbledore, terrified, begging him to hide Lily. And Dumbledore looks at him and asks, what about her husband? What about her innocent baby? And Snape basically admits he doesn't care if James and baby Harry are violently murdered as long as he gets to keep Lily.
Which prompts Dumbledore, a man known for his boundless compassion, to look at Snape with absolute revulsion and say, "You disgust me."
It's such a powerful moment.
It highlights the profound, consuming selfishness of Snape's motivation. He doesn't care about the sanctity of innocent lives. He views Lily as an object of his affection that he wants preserved at any cost.
People call his love romantic, always and all that, but it's really a 22-year obsession with a girl who rightfully cut ties with him when they were...
It's not romantic.
Not at all. She realized he was walking a dark path, and she set a healthy boundary and walked away. He holds onto this obsessive fixation for over a decade, and when she dies, he eventually takes out his bitterness on her orphan son.
He systematically abuses Harry.
Systematically. And he terrorizes other students like Neville Longbottom for years, to the point where Neville's literal greatest fear in the world, worse than the people who tortured his parents, is his potions teacher.
His actions as a double agent later in life are undoubtedly brave. They are instrumental to Voldemort's ultimate defeat.
Sure, we can't deny his effect.
But the psychological mechanism driving those actions is a desire for vengeance against the man who killed his obsession, not a fundamental desire to do good or protect the innocent. His bravery is real, but his bravery does not erase his cruelty.
It really shifts your perspective when you lay out the timeline like that. It forces you to look at the adults not as perfect heroes or cartoon villains, but as deeply damaged people making choices based on trauma.
Damaged people making damaged choices.
Exactly. And speaking of damaged adults, when I was reading through your notes on the character arc, you uncovered a parallel that I had never ever, and it involves Dumbledore himself.
Oh, this is perhaps the most heavily disguised psychological parallel in the entire narrative arc.
I am so ready for this.
If we look closely at the choices and the regrets, we find that the greatest, most powerful wizard in this universe, Albus Dumbledore, shares an almost identical psychological archetype with one of the most frustrating, pedantic, disliked characters in the series.
Percy Weasley.
Percy Weasley.
Dumbledore and Percy Weasley. It sounds absurd on the surface. One is the godlike mentor, and the other is a pompous bureaucrat who measures cauldron bottom. But the details are undeniable.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of how the author views ambition, the symmetry is astonishing. Let's start with the superficial structural traits.
Okay.
Both have five-letter first names, Albus and Percy. Both have middle names derived from a prominent family. Dumbledore is Albus Percival, named after his father. Percy is Percy Ignatius, named after his uncle.
Wow. Okay.
Both, in their youth, had striking red hair.
And their academic careers are carbon copies. Both were Gryffindor prefect. Both became head boy. Both were brilliant overachievers who vastly outpaced their siblings intellectually everywhere.
But the psychological parallels are where it becomes truly profound. Both harbored deep, unspoken resentment toward their fathers, believing their father's actions hindered their own social standing.
Tell us about Dumbledore's dad, because not everyone remembers that.
Dumbledore's father was imprisoned in Azkaban for attacking Muggles who had assaulted his daughter. This cast a permanent shadow of scandal and suspicion over the Dumbledore family name.
Right. And Percy.
Percy deeply resented his father, Arthur Weasley, for his lack of ambition and the resulting poverty and mockery it brought their family at the Ministry.
Which breeds a dangerous, blinding level of ambition in both of them. They both look at their families and see anchors.
They are incredibly power-hungry as young men. Dumbledore briefly abandons his responsibilities to his traumatized younger sister and frustrated brother to plot a global wizarding revolution with Gellert Grindelwald. He wants to rule for the greater good.
And Percy literally turns his back on his entire family, storming out of their home, disowning his parents to pursue his climb up the ranks of the Ministry of Magic.
And because they are so blinded by this desperate need for validation and power, they both get used as pawns by corrupt political figures. Dumbledore is manipulated by the charismatic intellectual fascism of Grindelwald. Percy is used by Cornelius Fudge and Rufus Scrimgeour to spy on his own family and to discredit Harry.
They even both completely ignore Harry during his disciplinary trial in the fifth. Percy acts as the scribe again, and Dumbledore refuses to even look at Harry.
The parallel concludes with the exact same tragic catalyst for change. The universe punishes their ambition in the most brutal way possible.
They both lose a sibling.
Both Dumbledore and Percy suffer the ultimate consequence for their blind pursuit of power. They witness the violent death of a sibling in the crossfire of their own choice.
Dumbledore's sister, Ariana, is killed during a chaotic three-way duel, but Dumbledore, his brother Aberfan, Dumbledore never knows whose spell carrying that guilt forever.
And Percy witnesses the death of his brother Fred in an explosion during the Battle of Hogwarts. Just moments after Percy finally swallowed his pride, admitted he was a fool, and returned to fight alongside his family.
He finally gets them back and immediately loses one.
It is a devastating emotional toll, but that profound grief acts as a permanent corrective lens. The guilt shatters their ambition forever.
It changes their entire trajectory.
After Ariana's death, Dumbledore realizes he cannot be trusted with ultimate power. The temptation is too great, and the cost is too high, which is exactly why he constantly refuses the position of Minister of Magic, retreating to the relative safety and influence of a school instead.
And Percy.
Following Fred's death, Percy abandons his grand, pompous political aspirations, eventually taking a low-stakes bureaucratic job in the Department of Magical Transportation.
This shared fatal flaw of Dumbledore's, his fear of his own power, his deep-seated guilt over the damage he caused his family, it brings us directly to what I think is the absolute crux of the entire.
It all hinges on a single conversation.
If you're sitting there wondering why Dumbledore acts the way he does toward Harry throughout the series, this is it.
It's the moment the story fundamentally breaks its own mold and reshapes its entire trajectory. The mentor archetype is deconstructed in real time.
We're talking about the end of the Order of the Phoenix, the fifth book. Harry is at his absolute lowest point. He has just watched his godfather, Sirius Black, fall through the veil and die.
Right.
He has just been physically possessed by Voldemort, experiencing agonizing pain. He's a traumatized, exhausted 15-year-old boy, and he is essentially suicidal with grief. He is standing in Dumbledore's pristine, beautiful, circular office, and he is physically destroying it.
Smashing delicate silver instruments.
Throwing things, screaming in absolute agony.
And the visual contrast in that room is striking. Harry is a storm of raw, unbridled, adolescent grief and rage. He wants to lash out at the world that took his family. And Dumbledore sits behind his desk, completely unmoving, unnaturally calm. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't draw his wand. He doesn't try to stop Harry from destroying his priceless possessions.
Why is he so calm? Any other teacher would have restrained him or yelled at him.
Because Dumbledore recognizes that this is the reckoning. For 5 years, he has been harboring a secret that he knows will destroy Harry's innocence permanently.
He knows it's over.
He watches Harry rage, and he accepts the destruction of his office as a meager punishment because Dumbledore is about to confess his biggest, most tragic flaw.
Which isn't a lack of magical power or a lack of tactical foresight. Dumbledore confesses that his fatal flaw was that he cared too much.
He tells Harry, "I cared more for your happiness than your knowing the truth."
Wow.
Dumbledore, the supreme strategist who's supposed to see the entire chessboard objectively, admits that he was paralyzed by human affection.
He loved him.
He looked at this orphan boy who had already suffered 3 lifetimes of abuse and pain at the dearth, and he simply could not bring himself to add the ultimate burden onto those small shoulders. He prioritized the temporary happiness of one boy over the tactical safety of the entire wizarding world.
And that's when he drops the bomb. He finally tells Harry the content problem.
Neither can live while the other survives.
He tells a 15-year-old kid that there is no out. Dumbledore isn't going to fix it. The Ministry of Magic. It has to be Harry, and it fundamentally has to end in murder, kill or...
It's a terrifying realization for a teenager.
But I have to ask, did Dumbledore have the moral right to withhold so long? Or was Snape ultimately right when he later accuses Dumbledore of raising Harry?
This conversation thrusts the reader right into a debate about utilitarianism versus empathy. Dumbledore arguably engineered a situation where Harry was kept safe and ignorant until his mind was mature enough to handle the sheer existential dread of the truth.
Right.
But in doing so, he stripped Harry of his agency. He manipulated the board so that Harry would walk willingly into his own death when the time came, because Harry wouldn't know any other way.
It's manipulative, even if it's born of love.
It is a terrible, godlike burden to place on a mentor, and Dumbledore buckles under it.
You can see the toll it takes on the narrative. This conversation changes the tone of the entire franchise from that point forward.
Completely shifts it.
Think about it. Harry transitions from being the boy who lived, which is a passive title, it's a survivor of something that happened to him when he was a baby, to being the chosen.
An active participant, an executioner.
Exactly. And the scene ends with a visual that shatters the bedrock of Harry. After delivering this crushing blow, Dumbledore, the ultimate, untouchable, omniscient mentor, hides his face in his hands and literally cries.
A single tear rolls down his face.
It's the moment the illusion of adulthood shattered. When you're a kid, you think the adults have a plan. You think they know what they're doing.
They can fix anything.
Yes. Seeing Dumbledore cry forces Harry and forces you as the reader to realize the adults are just as flawed, frightened, and helpless against the tide of war as we are. There is no safety net anymore.
Once that burden is placed squarely on Harry's shoulders, the narrative stops being a mystery series and becomes a war story. It hurtles toward its conclusion, and the final acts are designed to deliver profound emotional payoffs, swinging like a pendulum between devastating lows and incredible highs.
Let's talk about those lows. Because the grief depicted in these final books is so visceral, so grounded in the reality. We mentioned Percy Weasley earlier, but the specific detail of him during the battle...
Explosion.
An explosion goes off, the wall collapses, Fred is killed instantly, and Percy, this stiff, bureaucratic young man, just drops to the floor and refuses to move. He physically drapes his body over Fred's corpse to shield it from any further harm from falling rubble or spells.
It's an agonizing portrait of sibling grief, made infinitely worse by their estranged history. Percy spent years ignoring Fred, and his first instinct upon returning is to physically shield his dead body when it no longer mattered. But the narrative is filled with these quiet, devastating moments that break the reader, because they focus on the mundane artifacts of grief.
Right.
Look at Neville Longbottom visiting his parents in the psychiatric ward of St. Mungo's Hospital.
Oh, this one ruins me every time I read it.
His parents, Alice and Frank, were tortured into permanent insanity by Bellatrix Lestrange. They don't recognize their own son. They have no concept of who he is.
Brutal.
And during a visit, Neville's mother shuffles over to him in her nightgown, timidly hands him a piece of trash, a Drubal's best blowing gum wrapper.
And his grandmother is so dismissive.
Right. His grandmother sighs in embarrassment and tells Neville to throw it away, noting that his mother gives him enough wrappers to wallpaper his bedroom.
But Neville doesn't throw it away. When his grandmother turns her back, he silently wraps treasure.
We have to unpack the psychology here because it's so raw. It's the only form of connection his mother can offer.
Exact. It's a tiny, meaningless piece of foil. But to him, it is physical proof that she exists, that she is looking at him, and that some buried instinct or broken mind wants.
It perfectly captures the agony of loving someone with severe cognitive decline. Or consider Harry sorting through the wreckage of his godfather's house, finding a fragmented, handwritten letter from his mother, Lily, to Sirius.
Harry has never had anything belong. He stares at this piece of parchment, and it's a gut punch because he suddenly realizes mother made her lowercase g a exact same.
It's a microscopic, almost insignificant detail, but it entirely collapses the distance between a mythologized dead parent and a living, breathing human being.
He searches the letter for every G, feeling like each one is a friendly little wave from behind the veil. It's tangible proof that she was warm and alive, and that a piece of her biology is literally etched into his muscle memory when he...
It's devastating.
Yeah.
But the author is a master of balance.
Yeah.
For every tear we shed over a gum wrapper or a letter, we were given a fist-pumping moment of pure, unadulterated karma.
The heights of satisfaction in this story are incredibly potent, specifically because they are earned through that very suffering. The catharsis is proportional to the trauma.
Absolutely.
I mean, Watching Dolores Umbridge, the most vile bureaucratic nightmare of a human being, a woman who legislated cruelty being physically carried off into the dark of the Forbidden Forest by a herd of centaurs.
Centaurs that she had repeatedly degraded.
Degraded, insulted, and legislated against as filthy half-breeds. That is absolute poetry.
It is the classical definition of hubris meeting its downfall. Her prejudice becomes the literal vehicle of her destruction, but nothing compares to the catharsis of the final confrontation in the Great Hall.
Right, and it plays out so differently on the page than it does on screen. Think back to the first time you read the seventh book. In the text, Harry doesn't just duel Voldemort in a lonely, abandoned courtyard while no one watches.
No, the courtyard was a movie invention.
He strips off his invisibility cloak in the exact center of the Great Hall, surrounded by hundreds of survivors, students, and Death Eaters. He forces Voldemort to stand there and be publicly humiliated.
He doesn't just fight him physically with flashy magic. He dismantles Voldemort's entire worldview piece by piece in front of a captive audience.
He lectures him. He treats the darkest, most terrifying wizard of all time like a slow, ignorant student.
It's brilliant.
He explains the nuanced rules of wand lore to him, explains that Severus Snape was never loyal to him and was actually working for Dumbledore, reveals that Dumbledore's murder was completely staged. Harry systematically unspools every single thread of control Voldemort thought he had, rendering him totally psychologically powerless before the final spells even cast.
And then Voldemort's own killing curse rebounds, and he dies a mundane, mortal death.
His body hits the floor with a mundane thud, and he is shoved into a closet.
It's the ultimate deflation of a tyrant. It removes all his dark majesty.
It's so satisfying.
But this brings us to an interesting point of analysis regarding the adaptation, because while the books offer this deep layered satisfaction through dialogue and lore, the cinematic adaptations made specific choices that actually sharpen the narrative in ways the text didn't quite achieve.
I have to admit, book fans love to critique the films, and we just complained about the Time Turner stage play, but there are moments where the visual or auditory medium elevated the material beyond the page.
Absolutely. Take the death of Albus Dumbledore in the sixth film.
Okay, set it up.
In the text, the Death Eaters cast the Dark Mark, a terrifying glowing green skull in the sky, over the castle before Dumbledore arrived to lure him into a trap on the astronomy tower. It operates purely as a tactical decoy.
But in the movie, they don't cast the mark until after Dumbledore's been thrown from the tower.
Exactly. Changing the timing of that single visual action alters its narrative meaning entirely.
Wow.
By casting it after his death, the Dark Mark ceases to be a simple trap and becomes a powerful, looming symbol of a fallen leader. The green darkness literally eclipses the school, visually representing the loss of hope and the triumph of fascism in that moment.
That is a great change. Or look at how the sound designers handled Ron Weasley in the final film. In the book, Ron has a portable wizarding radio to occasionally listen for news.
Right. Potter.
But the filmmakers turn that radio into a brilliant auditory metaphor for trauma. Ron develops an unhealthy, consuming obsession. He is desperately turning the dial night after night, listening to a wall of static.
The sound design of the static and the fragmented, distorted voices perfectly mimics the chaotic, disjointed reality of wartime anxiety.
It exteriorizes his internal conflict.
That radio represents both his deepest hope that he will hear a code word meaning his family is safe and his most agonizing dread.
That he'll hear one of his brother's names read aloud on the couch.
Yes, another masterstroke in the adaptation was Sirius Black's final moment in the Department of Mysteries.
Oh, this one hurts.
In the heat of battle, just before he is struck by Bellatrix and falls through the veil, Sirius deflects a spell alongside Harry and shouts, "Nice one, James."
It's a tiny line of dialogue, entirely absent from the book, but it perfectly encapsulates the tragedy.
Sirius spent 12 years rotting in solitary confinement in Azkaban and never mentally healed from his 20s.
He is fundamentally incapable of separating his teenage godson from his dead best friend. In his final moments, his brain reverts to the last time truly happened. He dies trapped.
And perhaps the most controversial, yet arguably logical, change the movies made: the fate of the Elder Wand.
Oh, yes. In the text, Harry uses the most powerful wand in the world to repair his own broken Holly wand, and then he climbs back up to Dumbledore's tomb and puts the ultimate weapon of mass destruction back with the corpse.
Which is an astonishingly naive decision.
Because Dumbledore's tomb was already broken. Voldemort literally cracked the white marble open to steal the wand in the first. Putting the wand back in a known location, assuming you as a future Auror who fights dark wizards for a living will never be disarmed in combat and pass the wand's allegiance on, is a massive plot.
The film rectifies this logical gap. Harry realizes the wand's very existence invites bloodshed. It is too dangerous to exist.
So he physically snaps it in half and throws the pieces off a bridge into the chasm.
It provides absolute, permanent thematic closure to the cycle of violence and lust for power that the wand perpetuated for centuries.
Sometimes simplifying the mechanics strengthens the ult, but in simplifying a massive text for a 2-hour movie, we also lose incredible. And there is one lost backstory that got cut entirely from both the final and
A piece of lore hidden in the author's notes that changes how you view a background character entirely.
You're referring to the hidden tragedy of Dean Thomas.
I am.
Yeah. Throughout the entire series, Dean Thomas is just one of Harry's roommates, a kid who likes football and drawing. And in the final book, he is forced to go on the run, living in the woods, because he believes he is Muggle-born,
making him a primary target for the Death Eater regime's snatcher.
He thinks his dad was just a normal Muggle guy who walked out on him and his mom with baby.
But the author's original, unreleased draft contained a completely different reality.
Oh, this breaks my heart.
Dean's father was not a Muggle who abandoned his family out of cowardice. He was actually a very powerful wizard during the first Wizarding.
When Voldemort's forces were initially rising to power, they were trying to recruit powerful magic. They came for Dean's dad, and he refused to join them.
And because he refused to bow to fascists, the Death Eaters killed him. But here's the heartbreaking crux of the backstory.
What he did to protect them.
Dean's father deliberately never told his Muggle wife or his infant son that he was a wizard. He knew the political climate was escalating. He left his family without a word, allowing them to believe he was a deadbeat who abandoned them because he knew that associating with him would put a target on their back.
He sacrificed his entire reputation with his own family to ensure their survival. He was a hero, and Dean spent his entire life thinking he was discarded.
When he went on the run in the 7th book, sleeping in the freezing woods, terrified.
Completely unaware that his father died, defying the exact same fascist regime he was now hiding from.
It adds an immense layer of unseen tragedy to the periphery of the story. It demonstrates that heroism was happening constantly in the margins, often completely unrecognized, unrewarded, and misunderstood by the very people it protected.
It's profound. And it brings us full circle. I want to thank you, the listener, for coming on this incredible journey with us today. We've traced the hidden architecture of a global phenomenon.
It's been a ride.
We started with water-stained notebooks and scribbled names in 1991, cracked the code of Victorian flower languages, exposed the brutal psychological parallels of ambition and guilt, and laid bare the intricate mechanics of grief and redemption.
But as we close the blueprints today, there is one final lingering structural anomaly I want you to consider.
Ooh, a final thought.
Something that challenges the core foundation of how this universe. Think about the Sorting Hat. The foundational premise of Hogwarts is that this ancient magical hat looks deep into your mind and sorts you into a house based on your core inherent value. You are supposedly placed where you belong. Brave, cunning, loyal, or wise.
Right, that's the whole pit.
But reflect on what we've unpacked today. We saw Albus Dumbledore and Percy Weasley make identical, deeply power-hungry choices that destroyed their families, yet they were both placed in Gryffindor, the House of Bravery.
We saw Neville Longbottom, a boy terrified of his own shadow, placed in Gryffindor only to eventually find his courage.
And most jarringly, we saw Peter Pettigrew, a man who lived as a cowardly rat and betrayed his best friends to a fascist murderer simply to save his own skin, sorted into Gryffindor.
So if the hat puts all those contradictory people in the same house, what does that actually
It forces us to ask a profound question about identity. Does the Sorting Hat actually sort you by who you are? Or, knowing the deep psychological flaws of these characters, does it sort you by who you desperately want to be?
Does it measure your current reality or your deepest aspiration?
Think about that the next time you revisit the Wizarding.
Keep looking behind the drywall, keep questioning the architecture of the stories you love, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.